Awesome. Okay. Thank you for sharing. So let's do this. We're going to dive into my sample lecture. I've got this structured in a couple different ways, okay? So I'm going to give you a little bit of a lecture, talk a little bit about ideation, entrepreneurship in general, why I'm excited about it, why I like it. And then I've got an activity for us. And so I want to give you a little bit of a flavor of my teaching style and the pedagogy that I use in the class. And in that, we're going to go into breakout rooms. And so hopefully we can get set up in those breakout rooms in a little bit. But breakout rooms, I would say, we'll randomize them. Rooms of 5 would be excellent. And we'll go into those breakout rooms for just a little bit of time to do some ideation work on a topic that I will present. So behind the scenes, if we get those breakout rooms set up, that would be excellent. So why entrepreneurship? Why is this a topic that, one, captivates us? And I've got a number of quotes up here on the screen that you can see. Ex-UBC prof Carl Hansen with Abcelera. I'm sure you read about this in the news. But a huge success story coming out of Vancouver, coming out of UBC here in a wonderful IPO. Another company, Thinkific from Vancouver again. It's been a hot market. It's been a hot investing market in venture capital and early stage financing. Thinkific is a company that I happened to invest in early on as well and enjoyed the momentum that they have. I've got some other stats there, just fundraising in the venture capital space, hitting records. We've got a quote here from Elon Musk that I wanted to share. You know, it's not all about money. And the first 3 quotes I shared there had to do around money, but other reasons to be entrepreneurial as well. And some other key stats that I just love. Indigenous entrepreneurs are starting businesses at 9x the Canadian average, right? And just some areas, some huge opportunities for us to improve. And while a lot of these quotes that I've given, it's not the only reasons why you might be interested in entrepreneurship or why we need more entrepreneurs. Fighting climate change might be a really interesting idea, and a lot of activity happening here at UBC, here in Vancouver, that's really leading that. And you probably have read a lot of quotes saying, we can't really get rid of fossil fuels. Not yet. The inventions have yet to be made. The innovations are yet to exist. And we rely upon the future innovations and future inventions to get us there. So a little bit about myself. There's my mugshot that I use. But myself, I'm going to share with you how sort of I came into entrepreneurship and why it really met with me, even at a young age, not really believing in the status quo. I remember I got my first job coming out of university. I lasted for a year. After that, I walked into my boss's office after a year of working. I said, I quit. I can't do this 9 to 5, this monotonous work. But I'll work for you tomorrow, double the price, starting on contract. And that really started for me this, I guess, creating my own pathway in life. Sort of being the master of my own domain, doing what I wanted to do. And from there, I started just doing a lot of contract work. And I was filling my own 9 to 5 with various contracts, various companies, and had a great time doing that for about 10 years. After which I decided to come back to UBC and do my MBA. And the MBA was really a catalyst for me, and a catalyst in going from what I would call linear growth before that. Right, I was making X dollars an hour. I was billing out at $100, $125, $150 an hour, depending on the contracts. And sure, I could grow linearly. I could charge a little bit more. Maybe I could hire somebody. Maybe I could land another contract. But the MBA got me thinking about scalable growth. And it was this different perspective on what I could do with my own life in terms of trying to build something once and then trying to sell it multiple times. And so for me, that was a really pivotal moment in my life and in my thinking in general, as well as my career, about how to go from linear growth as an entrepreneur into scalable growth. And while I was in the MBA, there's a great class, Tech Entrepreneurship, that allows you to form teams and work on ideas. I'm a big backcountry skier. I grew up in Kelowna and lived in Whistler and Revelstoke, and I noticed that a lot of deaths happen in avalanches. And you know what, it's not an insane number of deaths, but it's about 15 to 20 a year here in Canada. And the problem is it appears on front page news every single time, right? But we didn't hear about the 500 deaths that occurred as a result of suicides in Alberta's economic downturn. We don't hear about those on the front page of every newspaper. So there was something about avalanches and something about the outdoors that really caught my attention, and had the ability to build a product in avalanche safety. Utilized the class as really a launching point, and was able to meet the people that I needed to meet, talk to the investors that I needed to, attract government funding, all as a result of this class at UBC. Launched the product, and it's currently being used by Whistler Blackcomb, Heli Ski Operations, BC Highways, and Parks Canada as well in their avalanche forecasting. It's something else that happened to me just this year. I was late to the baby game, but I had a little boy. I had the boy as I was wrapping up the PMBA last term, and that was a whirlwind moment for myself as well. And it really opened my eyes to other people that are going through the similar thing. And I was really grateful that as a cohort, we were able to go through that process together. It was a ton of fun. So just quickly on the class, I like to talk in fundamentals of oh, I see. Okay, I'm just sorry, Vivian. I'm just looking at your message there. We can't do the breakout rooms. That's fine. We can utilize it in real time, and we'll use the chat. So in my class, the way that I set it up with these topics is I really try to scratch the surface on a wide variety of entrepreneurial topics. Okay, now we can go deeper on each one of those, but what I like to scratch the surface on is ideation, thinking about where ideas come from, and this is going to be a little bit of the sample that I'm going to do today. Validation as well. How do you know it's a good idea? How can you start growing? How can you attract your first sales at potentially as well as your first investors? I also asked students in the class to put on an investor lens. And we look at various startups that are coming out of UBC, various startups in the Vancouver ecosystem that are actually raising money. Okay, and in this class, I'll actually have a startup come and pitch their idea to us. And what we do is we will look at this startup, evaluate them, and determine whether or not they are investment worthy. One of the other things I like to look at is as an entrepreneur. So for those of you who are working within larger organizations, not necessarily don't want to be an entrepreneur, I get it, it's not for everybody, but how can you apply innovation and those themes within a larger organization to continue innovation in those companies? And I've got a lot of good topics there as well. Now the pedagogy, the method that I use is seminars, lectures, short, synchronous and asynchronous as well. I use a lot of industry articles. We break out into a lot of breakout rooms, a lot of discussion, a lot of chat in some critical thought activities. And I also use simulations. I also push you with your fellow students to work in simulated environments where you can practice sort of that role playing. You can practice being investors. You can practice being entrepreneurs and pitching your ideas. In the methods of assessment that I use, we use some case studies. We will use an investor memo. I also ask the class to form teams, and in those teams to come up with a pitch and develop a startup idea within this classroom that you think will be viable for a potentially investable startup. And kind of a fun Dragon's Den-esque environment towards the end of the class. And then as well, I really, really love participation. I love it when people chime in. I love it when people speak up. I love it when people present their contrarian thinking and opposing thoughts and have a really, really good discussion around it. Okay? So let's get going just on the topics here of ideation. What drives ideation? What is it? There's been some really, really interesting research on the topic of ideation. And the reason is, of course, a lot of governments are saying, how can we create the next best innovations? How can we create the next Microsofts of the world, the next Teslas of the world, so that our government, our society can prosper from selling into different geographical regions? And so a lot of scientific papers, a lot of research has gone into how do we foster more innovation? So, what some studies have shown, and historically quite interesting, was just based upon this concept of the number of people that you are surrounded by really drives innovation. Okay, a city 10 times larger than its neighbor was 17 times more innovative. A city 50 times larger is 130x more innovative. And this kind of becomes a little bit obvious. You might be saying, Fraser, okay, I understand how a city like Armstrong or a small town like Summerland in the interior of British Columbia isn't creating as much innovation, perhaps, as Vancouver. That makes sense to me. But why is that? And you'll find that the large reason is just talking to people, sharing ideas, bouncing ideas off of each other, and letting those ideas naturally evolve. And a couple other things here that I want to point out is rarely is innovation coming from those isolated eureka moments. Okay, typically it's as a result of being at a conference, of talking to other people, of being around people, of being in Zoom meetings, and listening to how research is being applied to other areas and considering how we can apply it to our area. And it's really important that we make sure that this is possible for everybody. There's some really interesting things that we can't just let one or two individuals within the company to create these opportunities, but this is everybody that can really get involved in innovation. There's a famous building at MIT in the 1940s that was just creating a ton of innovation. And a study was done on why. Why was this? And it was because this building had a lot of open space. And you'll see that that's a result now in larger office buildings, in larger campus designs, is a lot of open space for people to chit-chat, people to bounce ideas off of each other. One of the things that I notice a lot of entrepreneurs are afraid of is sharing their idea. And while that feeling is there, that gut feeling to not share your idea, that could actually be detrimental. Right? Because what are the odds that that idea is the perfect idea? We need to let that idea evolve. We need to let that idea mature. We need to talk to other people and take their opinions and apply it to our own idea. A really good book of where ideas come from, I'll encourage you, if you're interested in the subject, pick up this book. It's on Amazon, probably available at the libraries as well. But it talks about how we can really seek out those ideas and let them sort of fester within us. A couple of things I want to point out here. Innovation, I like to call it, it's an invention plus commercialization. Sometimes you'll hear of this as invention multiplied by commercialization. But what I want to point out is not all inventions warrant a business. Right? It might be a great invention, might be a great research paper, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a commercial opportunity behind it. And similarly, not all inventions, not all innovations warrant a business on their own. Sometimes that's a great product, and that product belongs in a portfolio of products under an organization rather than just one product trying to become a business of its own. Various reasons for that, typically around costs, size of market, and scalable opportunities as well. Now, I really love this. I really want to point this out. We think about tracking our jogging activity, and we think about solving problems. And this concept of an innovation needs to solve problems. And here's an example where the problem was, I want to know how many calories I'm burning, and I want to know how far I am jogging. Okay, this problem around today, this problem was around in the 80s. And actually, Puma invented the first distance and calorie tracker in 1986. And I'm just cautioning you because sometimes you're going to come up with a great idea, but the market might not be ready for it. And you need to think about what barriers are my consumers facing in order for this product to be widely adopted. And so here's an example where Puma had a floppy disk and you could get data off your shoes. You had to plug them into your computer. The problem here is that computers weren't widely adopted, right? And it really took it took mobile phones, and it took a $5 or a 99-cent downloadable app to really modernize and get the uptake that we needed in tracking our distance and running. So another great book that I love, and again, I would encourage you regardless, grab a copy of The Innovator's Dilemma. It was a book that's a bit older, about 30 years old, but the information in this stems from Clayton Christensen's PhD work that he did at Harvard, and it's very much relevant to today. I have friends working in the investment industry. They love this book for the exact same reason. How do they know the companies they're investing in are going to continue to be innovative within their markets? Okay, so the basics of the book, it talks about how there's emerging markets, and it talks about how there's a disruptive technology. And usually, CEOs see these emerging markets come, they see the disruptive technologies there, but they don't want to disappoint their investors by moving cash away from perhaps profits and into R&D expenditures. Okay, so what the book talks about is typically a culture around wanting to meet quarterly goals. And even though we've identified and recognized changes on the horizon, we are not being the ones to be there. So great book, highly recommend you grab a copy. Something else I like is Gartner's hype cycles. Would encourage you, have a look at these, check them out, because this kind of goes back to our timing topic with Puma and the shoes. And it's where in the hype cycle are we, right? And you'll see these themes coming up, popping up all the time. Every 3 years there seems to be a new theme, all right? And it was Bitcoin and it was blockchain. Today it's ETFs. There's AI, there's robotics, there's space exploration. Always these themes that are popping up. And for those of you who invested in cannabis, you probably invested, like myself, at the peak of the cannabis hype. And what you're seeing now is we're finally towards the end, the plateau of productivity, let's call it, in the cannabis industry. And so just always think about, as an entrepreneur, as an innovator, how far out are we from actually getting market adoption, right? And we want to be riding the wave, but we don't want to be stuck at the top and at the bottom. Couple different things that I like here from Greg Sattel, just this topic around different types of innovation. One of the questions I get from people is, Fraser, entrepreneurship inspires me, but this concept of creating a scalable or a massively scalable startup kind of scares me. I would rather start off perhaps somewhere smaller, somewhere where maybe we can create a side hustle. We can get into some revenue. I can work my evenings and weekends to do that. And so with that, there's different types of innovation that we can pursue, okay? Typically what I'm involved with, I work here at UBC. I also run the core incubator program. And so in the incubator program, we work with a lot of that bottom right, the disruptive innovation, VC model, innovation labs, and the Lean Launchpad. So we're looking for companies that are going to be largely scalable. Now, it doesn't mean as an entrepreneur working on a side hustle is wrong or is bad. By all means, I would applaud you and I would say go for it, and I will support you in that. It just means that there's going to be different people who are looking for different things within entrepreneurship. Another area is, what sort of research are you basing your work on? Okay, and it might be applied research where the basic research has already been done. But in some instances, particularly here at the university, I deal with a lot of basic research, which is seeking market opportunities. So like I said, being involved here at UBC, which is our incubator program, I run the core program, and we also have a lab to launch program. I'll sit through probably 200 pitches a year, where I listen to 200 different ideas coming out of the university. And I would say, from being at the university, being around researchers, some of the more interesting is the basic research-driven opportunities. However, there can be a long time in that market adoption to really get that product to market. And Sarthak, I see your question there. How do we convince users to adopt if they weren't aware of it or that a problem needed solving? And this is critical when I talk to entrepreneurs, is if you had $1 million, sure, we can educate the market that the problem exists. If we had $1 million, we could go and we could advertise. We could put advertisements up on Facebook. We could do TV appearances. We could really get people to know about it. However, most startups don't have an advertising of $1 million. If a startup is even lucky to raise $1 million, that money is usually going straight holistically into R&D. And so I tell entrepreneurs they need to focus on problems that are at the tip of people's tongues, that people know that the problem's there, they're actively seeking a solution, they have a budget available, and that's where you're going to find more success. So, good question. How do we convince people? It takes a long time to get out there and to do it. My Avalanche product that I was working on is based on basic research. I'm looking at fracture dynamics and the fracture toughness of snow, trying to take a tool forward to help people be able to better predict avalanches. And so I'm in that same scenario. So I'm doing a lot of conferences. I'm doing a lot of boothing. I'm doing a lot of trying to get articles written in various publications that are read by my audience. And it takes time. It definitely does. So if you can be the startup, though, that is solving immediate problems that need solving today, you're going to be able to do it faster. So this was the breakout I wanted to do. And in lieu of being able to go into breakout rooms and have a bit of a discussion, what I'd like to do is I will introduce the topic. We'll take a 5-minute break, and I will allow you to ideate on it. And then I'll come back and I'll ask a couple people in the chat to share with us what their ideas are. And again, this is something that I see a lot here at the university. So I have this concept of a push or a pull. And what do I mean by this? Is I'll see entrepreneurs come into my room and we'll get talking about their idea, the idea that they want to take to market, the idea that's going to make them the next Mark Zuckerberg. And either I see it being a push or I see it being a pull. And the push, based on that basic research. There's been an innovation that has been made, something has been built, and it's there and it's done. Now at the university, that is typically innovations or research driven that probably cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not $1 million to get done. Papers were written, research was published, patents were perhaps pursued, and it's been created. So what I mean is we're probably not going back to the drawing board to recreate that invention. It's there, it's done, but now we need to find markets to sell this into. And so I'm going to set us up with this activity, which is exactly this. This was an invention that came out of the university, and this entrepreneur wanted help identifying markets. Now, I see this time and time again, and it's interesting. In my position, working with teams as an entrepreneur in residence and as the lead of the core program, is to help these entrepreneurs find markets. And we're looking at different things. We're looking at exactly that question that was asked before. Is there a market that is asking for their problem to be fixed? Is it a sizable market? Is it we look for $1 billion in potential sales. The reason we look for $1 billion is we know that probably only 1% of that market will be converted or will be penetrated by our startup. And so if we're looking at $1 billion, I need to know that there's at least $10 million in revenue that can go into paying people, salaries, future R&D, building an application layer, getting that product to market. So we look for at least $1 billion market size. Other things we look at, what are the regulations, regulatory hurdles that need to be overcome? We look at the consumer side, the willingness to pay, the stickiness of the product. A number of things go into it. Now on the pull side is perhaps a lot of you can identify with the pull side. You're working in industry, you're seeing problems around you, and you're saying this can be solved. My gosh, this is a repetitive problem that exists over and over and over again. And then you go and you look for that technological innovation. And so in that search, as the entrepreneur, you don't necessarily care what the solution is. You just want the solution to fix the problem. And I've got a couple of good examples on this pull. One that I typically see having to do with plastic waste. And a lot of people come to me with various pull solutions for this. They'll say, Fraser, there's too much plastic waste in the ocean. There's too much plastic waste in the landfill. We're not doing a good enough job. Here is my solution. And it's interesting. I'll get a lot of startups pitching me ideas about better recycling, about sorting plastic in different ways. But rarely do I get people digging deep on the problem and doing perhaps the 5 whys and really studying what's the core of the problem. Is the core of the problem not that we are consuming, or utilizing, or manufacturing too much plastics? Should we not instead go into a realm of building more compostable products rather than doing a better job of sorting? If we got rid of the plastics, that would get rid of all of these subsequent problems down the line. So let me talk a little bit about the push, and this is the example I'm going to bring in. The other book I would highly recommend have a look at is Where to Play. Love this book. It gives you a lot of different ways of evaluating markets, and would highly recommend the read. It's a really easy read to go through, but it looks at 2 different axes. Looks at the market, and it looks at the difficulty or the challenge ahead of you to get that product to market. So here's the example I want to do, and like I said, we'll take 5 minutes off screen. I'll turn my video off. I'll let everybody go into deep thought for 5 minutes. I would encourage you, pull up pen and paper, have some fun with this, okay? This is something I see a lot of consultants having to do over and over, and it's really interesting on how, if we let ourselves ideate, we let ourselves come up with business ideas, where we end up. So what I want you to do is come up with some different business ideas. Come up with some entrepreneurial ideas that you think maybe this technology could be placed. Let me describe the technology to you. This is an individual here at the university, was doing his PhD in mathematics. And he developed an algorithm that would create a color palette based upon a picture. So all he created was a software command line program. Okay, now what that means is there's no application, there's no app, there's no website, there's no UI around what he created. All he created was an algorithm that takes in a photo. You can give it the JPEG, a GIF, any sort of picture format you want. And so here's the example. You give it this picture that's on the top. And what the algorithm is going to do is it's going to produce a perfect palette that is delivered to you. So you're going to give it the picture, and the output is going to be the palette. And this entrepreneur was wondering, well, what do I do with this? Where do I go? And Ashok, I see your question there. You don't need to be technically inclined for this activity. What I want you to do is just drum up business ideas. If I could tell you I can give you any picture in the world and you're going to give me back a perfect color palette, I'm interested in knowing what types of businesses, entrepreneurial businesses, that you could create around this invention. Okay, and if some of you remember back to elementary school, you'll remember the color wheel. You'll remember that we have contrasting, opposing colors. And what this color palette does is it truly is lined up with the color wheel to be that perfect palette. So it's not just going through the photo and drawing out random points of color. It's really taking the theme out, using the color wheel to extrapolate a perfect palette. So what I'm looking for, again, let's take 5 minutes. Just drum up some ideas. Let's see where we can go with this. And so I'm going to turn my video off. I'll give you 5 minutes to think about. Again, use pen and paper, come up with some ideas, write down a couple of your favorites, and then we'll explore them and talk about them together. Cool, very good. So please, if you get an opportunity, post in your idea, what you're thinking about. You can be totally transparent, be honest with this, and let's just kind of have a look at some of the things. Now, I guarantee you this is going to come up in your life, right? And I've presented to you with this invention coming from the university. But you will come into this through your friends, through your family members. People are going to say to you, what do you think about my idea? Right? I've created this totally cool new pair baby apparel. How do you think I should market it? How could I turn this into a new consumer product? And this is your role. This is what you got to do. Is you got to be able to stand up and say, okay, let me help you ideate. Right? Don't just sit back and say, I don't know. Good luck. Right? But really come up with some ideas. And you know what? You're going to come up with hundreds of ideas, hundreds of different ways. And out of those, there's going to be a small number that are actually going to succeed. But that's what is required, is for us just to get these ideas out. Listen to each other. Allow the ideas to change. So let's start at the top. Thank you, Leon, for being the first. Having to do with autism, helping people understanding their emotions, deeper thoughts, colors, and changes of colors. Very interesting, right? So one of the questions I would have for you, Leon, is who do you think the payee would be of that product? And we got a lot of comments to go through here, Leon, so I might not see it, but thinking about who the payer is, right? Is it going to be the parents of? Is it going to be an autism society? How are we going to bill them for that? Is it going to be a monthly charge? Is it going to be a one-off, right? Is it going to be a special session that we host? Right? So as we think about these ideas, don't forget, right, that business model, that revenue model, we also need to think about. So thank you, Leon. Michael, like your idea, looking at a compression method, maybe to pull out various patterns and say, okay, we can not represent all of these different pixels. We can just sort of compress them in and perhaps have a little bit of loss on the image. Using it to restore old or vintage photos. So that's interesting. Is perhaps maybe a little bit of a reverse method on that as well. Knowing maybe a color palette of what a photo should have been. Knowing perhaps what colors Da Vinci had or Michelangelo had available to them, what paint colors there were. What would the natural photo look like? I like that idea. That's interesting. Again, who are we selling that to? Right? What is the price point? How do we make it sticky? Marcel, I'm just looking at your comment here. It could be a commercialized control tool for sleep. Less harmful colors to better the impact of sleep. Interesting. I've never thought of that, and I've never heard of that idea. That's lovely. And Manola, yes, and interior design. So this is one of the more common ideas that I get out of this project, or sort of this use case, is interior design and recommending different products that they could be. Now, your idea specifically is for IKEA, right? And I've also heard of this idea, though, for maybe a blended shopping experience, right? Let's say I was an interior designer and I had a new apartment building going up, and I had a color a photo that I liked. And I don't care where I get my products or at what price points, but just deliver me a couch, deliver me a pillow, deliver me a throw. And whether that all comes from IKEA, whether that comes from other places, just deliver me an all-in-one shopping experience, right? So really, really interesting. Maria, your comment is along the same. David, designers, artists, based upon a color palette. Cool. Again, David, I would ask the question, like, great idea. How do we monetize this? What are we charging for? There's a lot of different ways that we can bundle revenue. A lot of different methods of pricing innovations, testing pricing on people and being able to sell products to them in different methods, or maybe in new methods that they want. Art classes and studios, love it, right? And to Maria, art classes and studios, as well as Mark, you're commenting on it as well. Something that I do, ideas that I have heard are plugins, right? And so maybe you're in Photoshop and you get a plugin that you can build and you can sell that. I've also heard of building this as a plugin for perhaps Shopify, so that people can theme their websites and have the colors on their website according to a photo that I like. And Scarth, yes, good points. Maria, selling it to Sherwin-Williams. So some great ideas in here. And I want to encourage you to go to color.adobe.com. And what you'll find on color.adobe.com, there's a tab where you can upload an image and actually get this done. When I was working with this entrepreneur at the beginning, we were spitballing a lot of different ideas. My idea was for them to just create a website where they could upload an image and get a color palette back out. Simple as that. And if you go to color.adobe.com, that's exactly what they're doing. Now I came up with that idea before Adobe launched that service. Maybe they stole it from me somehow. But my point is I just wanted to test the market. I wanted to get a product to market. I wanted to encourage our artists, our painters, our interior designers, our digital designers, and I wanted to send them to our website where we could track the number of visitors, we could track the number of use cases, and then from that point on, we could say, okay, we've captured profiles of people that are using it. It's a hot item. Now let's put some money into further application development and thinking about where we should go next. But my first step was something lean, something easy to do that wasn't going to take much work. Now, where this entrepreneur actually went against this lean methodology advice, which is try things easy, try things cheap, is where they went is they started scraping millions of products off the internet. Handbags, shirts, clothing, shoes, sweaters. And they started scraping all of these clothing items, putting them into their own database, generating palettes off of them, so that if somebody uploaded a photo, it would say, here's all the products that you can buy and you can dress as according to this color palette. Now, you would have the ability to check out and order from all of those different sites in a single checkout option. This entrepreneur has been at it now for 3 years. They've poured a lot of investment money, their own friends and family money into it, and they're just finding it too difficult to get that specific product to market. One reason is they're trying to build their own app and drive people into their own app. People are usually pretty happy on their own channels, on their own mediums. They're pretty happy just kind of sitting on Amazon, right? Going to their physical stores. It's very difficult to encourage millions of people to download and use an app to its full advantage. They're also finding to manage millions of items of inventory, the prices, the in-stock, the availability of sizes and colors, just to be overwhelming. It's too much for a small startup to do. Now, if you're looking at the other side of the equation, I talked about push, and we just did a little bit of an exercise. If you're looking at the pull, and for many of you in your current work environments, I would encourage you to think about this first principles approach to problem solving. Again, I love this book. Whether or not you end up in the class, please grab a copy of this book and engage it. This allows you, in your current work environments, to really dive deep on problems, right? And then you can start to look at what are the potential solutions to solve them. Because not every first solution is going to be the best one. And unless we really know the root problem that we're solving, we're not going to know if that solution is great. So a couple of things I want to talk about. I'll wrap us up here in the next couple of minutes, but just got a couple more slides here on being entrepreneurial. Okay, lots of different ways you can be entrepreneurial. I'm not asking for everybody to quit, to stop and start their own startup tomorrow. I'll encourage you to do that, but I totally understand. We're all in different places in life. We all have different ideas of what risk is in our own careers, and I get it. But there's a lot of interesting opportunity here in Vancouver to be the entrepreneur and also to join startups. I have a friend out of our MBA. He joined Slack. Started working at Slack. His stock options are worth more today than his combined earnings since our MBA. Yeah, I have another friend working for another company selling software. His salary, $250,000 a year. His first level bonus, another $250,000. His second level bonus, another $250,000. These are jobs here in Vancouver working for hot startups. Okay, so it's an exciting area to be in. A lot of companies raising cash. Again, I wanted to talk about this concept of small, medium enterprise versus innovation-driven enterprises. There is nothing wrong with creating a small business, a restaurant, a coffee shop, a consulting business, and I will support you in those as well. But do note, investors, venture capitalists are typically looking for the innovation-driven enterprise. So thinking about the startups and what I encourage you to do in my class as part of one of our projects is just this, thinking about gaps that exist. Bringing in your own professional experience is what I find works best. When I work with undergrads, I find that their ideas lack any detail. They lack some extensive thought, and usually they're a result of not having their parents around anymore, okay? Folding their laundry, cooking food, those types of startup ideas is typically what comes out from a younger audience. From an older, more mature audience, I love the ideas because they are typically a lot more real, a lot more meat to them. 3 things I look for: problem, solution, and business model. I've got a number of bullet points in here. We dive into these bullet points within the class. I encourage you to follow a lean startup model. And this is where we're testing things cheap, right? So think back to that color example. I didn't recommend to the entrepreneur to go out and build an app. I didn't recommend that they raise $500,000 and start inventory of clothing. I recommend they just launch a website for probably a cost of, honestly, $1,000 or less, and just drive traffic there and test it out. The search. Often, what I find is people start with their idea that might not be correct. And usually, this is part of the search. And so, Gurjit, going to your question there, what makes you a good leader, in my opinion, as an entrepreneur, is being able to listen to the data. It's being able to listen to what your customers are saying, and then relate that through a strong vision to your employees, to your investors. And being able to tie that together. So the search takes grit, takes time, money. I have a team that came to me about 3 years ago and said, Fraser, we want to create a robot that automatically picks strawberries. Love it, love the idea. They're finally today, September 9th, they're going to have an investor day where they're going to bring investors out to a farm in Abbotsford and demonstrate picking strawberries. It's been 3 years, okay? For those 3 years, how did those entrepreneurs fund themselves? They had to get government grants. They had to get some friends and family money. It takes time and it takes determination. Lyft is a great example. Lyft didn't start off as a ride-hailing company. Lyft started off as a carpooling company, or sorry, I should just call it a carpooling organization. They put flyers up around campus. If you're coming from certain neighborhoods, you could get rides in. Then they started to see with smartphones coming out that they could allow people now to hail rides and get that. So their initial idea was not as good. And what they need to do is, through this process of the search, is just get at it, is pivot, learn from the market, see opportunities as they present themselves. Another story on WeWork, I just don't have enough time to talk about, but they actually started off selling children's clothing and had a lot of unused space within their office. They have a great podcast on how I built this. Would encourage you to have a look at it. And a couple tips here. Avoid groupthink. This is an interesting one. Seek out the contrarian viewpoints. If everyone is sort of agreeing and patting each other on the back, you're not going to be innovative. Be open to change. Again, I recommend to all entrepreneurs in the early ideation phase, spend 90% of your time searching, talking to people, trying things, and then 10% of your time back in the office, perhaps writing down your business plan, perhaps working on your software. Okay, 90% of your time early on should be out there and getting going. So some of the final questions that I'll leave you with, okay? Number one, why hasn't something been built? Why hasn't this been done before? Why hasn't a solution already been built? Okay, and while we might be contrarian, don't be overly contrarian, right? Look to the market, look to see that there's already activity going on, there's already market spend, and you're not trying to invent a new market. Look for what unsatisfies people. Look to see for those problems. Just observe, witness, where's time wasted? Don't forget to ask yourself, how do we make money? How much are people willing to pay? I find entrepreneurs are very afraid to have these honest and frank questions with their customers, right? I say to a lot of entrepreneurs I work with, what's your call to action to your customer? Don't just ask your customer, do you think this is a good idea? Would you like to use this? Ask your customer, are you willing to put $20 down today? Here's my PayPal account, right? Or ask if it's a bigger contract. Great, this will probably cost us $20,000. Are you willing to put $2,000 down today as a prepayment? Right? Ask for that call to action. And do ask yourself, if it's a scalable business opportunity, excited for the next 4 years. If it's a side hustle, is this something you're going to want to do for the next 4 years? Because we need to see that grit, we need to see that determination. So I'll finish there, and a couple points there I see in the question. Do I bring design thinking? I do. I bring design thinking aspects of that problem, prototyping, testing the market, collecting data, and then refining. So I do bring design thinking aspects into my class. And Michael, how do you determine the failure margin and the potential burn rate? So Michael, I like to think of this more as set your early stage milestones, determine the costs for you to hit those milestones. Think back to the color example. I set the milestone to build a website, get your algorithm on it, and it'll probably cost you $1,000. Let's hit that milestone, learn from it, then set our next milestone. We need to also assign go, no-go decisions. We need to assign failure criteria. What happens if I'm wrong? What happens if I send 1,000 people to my website and only 2 people use my product? When do I abandon it, right? As opposed to this thought of let's raise $1 million, let's have burn rates and see where we end up. I like to think of what are your milestones? How much money do you need to raise? And what's your evaluation criteria at those milestones? Anders, how much entrepreneurship is luck and preparation? And let me add on to this. Can entrepreneurship be taught? And I think that's a great debate. I think a lot of it is grit. I think luck definitely has a play. We've got mentors in our program. In the core program, where we bring teams in and help them foster ideas in our incubator and accelerator. And I'll admit it, there's some mentors who come in who have done well, sold their businesses, made tens, perhaps even more millions. Yet some of the fundamental questions that I have in some of these deep problem analysis is new to them. And they'll admit, they'll say, you know what, I think I just got lucky. Because sometimes you hear those same entrepreneurs unable to do it the second time, the third time, the fourth time, right? And maybe they're saying, you know what, I was lucky. Being in the right market at the right time. However, being in the right market at the right time requires hustle, requires grit, and requires you with that go-getter type of attitude, and also having seen an opportunity in that place, okay? Let's see, any other questions down at the bottom before we wrap up? Good. Okay. Awesome. And then what was that final comment there? Oh, Ashok, how do we find the right team for a new venture? Okay, I love this topic. I get asked this question a lot. Out of 100 entrepreneurs that come and see me and ask me to help them build a team, I have maybe one person that walks in and says, I'd like to join a team. And usually the challenge facing entrepreneurs is they always want to work on their own idea. If I got 5 entrepreneurs in the room, each 5 of them is going to have a different idea. They're going to try to recruit each other into their own idea, okay? So you need to go to events, you need to network, and you need to get out there where you're going to find those other people that you can convince. Finding the right team starts with your vision and is followed up with your passion. You need to convince me or any future developers or anybody else to work with you why they should work with you, why they should leave their risk-free career to join a risky startup where maybe in the first year they're earning half of what they would have, but you're going to give them 10, 20% equity in the company. Okay, and that's something else we talk about in the classes. We talk about how do we entice and encourage people to join us by giving out equity in this idea. Okay, so thank you for the question. No such thing as a risk-free career. True. Small amount of risk. Awesome. Okay, thank you everybody. Really enjoyed the opportunity to be here and just share with you my passion about entrepreneurship. And so regardless, hopefully I'll see you soon. And if not, please do yourself a favor, pick up some of the books that I recommended, have a read through and apply them to where you are at, and please just innovate. Never stop innovating, and because we can always do that. We can always make the world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fraser. So for those of you that would like to stay for an advising session, so it's kind of an ask us anything kind of session. Fraser has indicated to us that he's generously going to be staying for a few minutes of this kind of optional advising session. So it would just be me, Fraser's going to be here for a little bit, as well as PMBA career coach Maria Harmer. So all 3 of us are going to be available. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the Q&A. It's a little easier for us to track your questions if it's in the Q&A. but we'll also be scanning the chat as well for any questions that you might have. So anything that you might have in terms of PMBA admissions or in terms of career trajectory, or any further questions you might have for Fraser, feel free to pop them into the Q&A chat box or the chat, and we'll be scanning for any questions that you might have. Okay, so I do have some questions here. So from Sarthak, is the video part of the selection process? So as you know, for the PMBA application, for those of you that have gone through the application, there is like a video component. So it's like basically a 90-second video that you prepare in advance, and you upload to, prepare in advance in answer to a question that you'll encounter in our application. And then you prepare it, and then like you have all the time that you want, and then basically upload it to YouTube or Vimeo and send us the link. And that's part of the application process. So a few notes about the video. Like, I think it's, a lot of people like end up being quite stressed out about it. Like, I get it. Like, you guys are busy professionals. So really focus on the content. So really look at, like, don't give us generic answers. So if we were hypothetically asking you a question about how the PMBA transformed your career, don't just say things like, it gives me the tools to transform my career, right? That's pretty obvious. So like, go into detail, think about yourself, think about your learning objectives, think about what you want to get out of the program, consider your career objectives, and answer the question showing that you really thought about the topic area kind of in depth. So that's a little bit about the video there. Now see if there's any other questions here. Okay, question is, do you anticipate that classes will be held remotely next year or in person? That's a really good question. So obviously right now we are return to campus, like I'm on campus right now. So, hopefully with like the high rate of vaccinations we've had at BC in British Columbia, we stay in a situation where in-person classes are allowed. Like everything that we do at UBC basically is under the provincial health authority guidelines. So right now it looks like we are holding the classes in person, but of course with coronavirus, the situation is fluid, right? So I can't guarantee, we don't have a crystal ball to say like in January, what it's going to look like. Maybe we have this thing beat by January, maybe we don't. So we don't have guarantees, but right now we are planning in-person classes. So that's a great question. Okay, let's see here. So a question from Larissa, in regards to admissions, what is the deciding factor for successful candidates? Is their GPA, work experience? What is the most important factor? That's a great question. And Maria, feel free to jump in as well, like from a careers perspective. But for us from admissions, we're basically looking for candidates that are ready to benefit from this program. In a very simple way to say it like that, it's just like, when you're ready to benefit from this program in terms of you have career goals lined up, you know what you want to get out of the program in terms of learning objectives and career objectives, those are like the fundamental parts on a qualitative aspect, right? Like on the quantitative aspect, you have the foundation of the academics. So we are looking for solid academics. So typically like a B+ average for your undergrad. And then, if you're writing the GMAT or GRE, then we're looking for like a competitive score in the GMAT of 650 or higher, or GRE, we're looking for a score of 320 or higher. So if you're writing the standardized tests, like we're looking for those scores. Now, keep in mind, like these, like people really get hung up on these academic things, like, your GPA or your GMAT and things like that. And, if you get the standard, like that's fine. Like there's a whole other part of the application process that's really talking about, your readiness to approach this program, how much research you've done into this, and, what your career objectives are. And essentially when we look at you, we're thinking like looking at the whole package. Will they do well academically? What is their academic background? That's one thing. But the other thing is like, will this person be successful in their career from doing our program? And if we think you will be, that's basically a hallmark of, who's going to get into the program, right? So we're essentially looking for the same thing. You should be looking for the program that will best advance your career objectives and your learning objectives. And we are also looking for the same thing. Maria, I don't know if you want to chime in on like, what do you think makes a successful candidate from a careers perspective? Because Maria works with candidates very closely throughout the whole journey of the PMBA. So I would love to see if you have any thoughts as to like what readiness looks like for this program and what's an ideal from a careers perspective.
Sorry, I have a bit of background noise here, but hopefully you can hear me. From a careers perspective, we are looking for individuals who are good articulating what they want to foresee or what are the steps that they want to gain getting this degree. So 90% of our students who go through the program have some kind of career change. It can be promotion, enhancements, or total career shift. But if you are in the beginning of the program totally lost on what do I want to do next, that may not be the best place to start from. So as Vivian said, putting some thought ahead of time, what do you want to change? You don't need to know where you are going, but having that clear idea and able to communicate that. We have multiple assessments, tests, and of course, a lot of history with our graduates. So there's a lot of discussion points, but if you are not prepared to have these conversations, or perhaps if you are thinking about doing your career shift 3 or 4 years after your degree, that is going to be problematic. So somebody who's ready to have that change and have those discussions, either with a clear vision where you want to go or with a clear vision what you don't want to see in your future. That would be a good starting point.
Thank you so much, Maria. Like, it's really great to hear from you about that, because so much of the MBA decision, it comes as a thought process for yourself. It's not suddenly like you do the MBA and it becomes a magic bullet for you. It's not. So much of what you get out of an MBA is also what you put into it. So you have to do the legwork into thinking, what does this mean for me? And what are my objectives, right? And so it's not just like, it's also a big investment of your time and money. So we always, as an ethical, institution, we want to make sure that this is value added for someone that's ready to value from it. So much of the legwork is actually going to be like your own thought process and the research you put into it. An MBA is not a magic bullet. The most successful people, they use the MBA to leverage what, basically to get what they put into it, right? Like, it's not just like 3 letters that is going to solve all your problems or tell you where to go or give you the answer to life, right? That's what you find on yourself. So thank you so much for that, Maria, because it's really great to hear from someone that works so closely with the students. So let's check in the chat box and see if there are other questions for us. Okay, so a few questions. What are the key differences from SJ? What are the key differences between an EMBA and a PMBA from your point of view? So that's a really good question. So EMBA programs typically denote what it sounds like, right? It's usually an MBA for people that have already found themselves in the executive levels and they need an MBA to basically do their job, right? So it's almost, it's basically they've already gotten to where they need to go. Whereas at PMBA, there's a lot more focus on that career development and career advancement. And that's why we do have this 90% career advancement or promotion rate within the 24 months of the program. So that's a hallmark of the work that Maria does, which is absolutely amazing. But EMBAs would typically not focus so much on that kind of career advancement aspect, because usually people that are in EMBAs are already in those positions. They're doing an MBA to learn how to do their jobs better. Anything you want to add to the difference of PMBA or EMBA, Maria? Okay, that pretty much covers it. Basically covers it in the name, basically. Let's see here, a few more questions here. Okay, this is a question from Larissa, and I think Maria, you might be the best person to answer this, but with the PMBA, is there a high percentage of entrepreneurs in the program or students who become entrepreneurs? So just your feedback on your years of working with PMBA students and what the percentage of entrepreneurs look like.
I think the highest percentage, what I have seen people being entrepreneurs is from our 2018 and 2019 class, so pre-COVID. People were more willing to take risks. And we had about 60% of the class doing entrepreneurial engagements, but typically side gigs. So I would say every year we have from a class of, let's say, 50 people, 3 to 5 individuals who purely choose to jump into that entrepreneurial path without continuing with their careers. But the percentage, 50-60% came from those 2 classes where people were pursuing side hustles. And it was amazing. It was just 3 months in the program, one gets an idea, and everybody was so inspired by these ideas that at the end of those programs, we had that huge percentage of people doing that type of activities. COVID has changed things a bit. So I haven't seen those numbers so much during the epidemic. People are too busy just maybe coping with the things. But I would expect that the situation will be closer to that original number that I highlighted 2 to 3 years post this situation.
Thanks so much, Maria. Okay. Okay, so Kevin's taking care of the question about the IELTS. So just because I'm getting a lot of questions about the IELTS and the English test, so I'm just going to say it again right here. So in case anyone's missing it, basically you don't need to write an English test like the IELTS or the TOEFL if you did a first degree in an institution where the medium of instruction is English. So it can't just be the program itself in English. It literally has to be the entire institution has to be in English. So that's the guideline. If you did a bachelor's degree or you did a master's degree and the medium of instruction at that institution is English, then you would qualify for a waiver of the English test. Now, just so you know, the standard for the test that we're looking for, the IELTS academic, we are looking for a 7. So your average score should be 7 across the different bands. And for the TOEFL, it will be a score of 100. So that's basically kind of the rundown on the English tests. And I thought I would just bring it up here because we've gotten quite a few questions on that. So one thing, let me just check if there's further questions. So there's a few things I want to show the group, assuming my technology kind of cooperates me with this time. I've been having quite a day with that. So let me see if I can actually show you a web page that we have, which is very helpful for those of you that are completing your applications. So this is basically just the how to apply web page. So for those of you that are completing your applications, this is really helpful for you to kind of do a checklist of things that you want to make sure is covered. Now, a few questions we always get are things like, what do official transcripts look like and what we're looking for? So this kind of gives you like addresses where you can send your applications, as well as like what it means for your transcripts to be official. So it's a wealth of information here about like how your transcripts can be handled. A lot of times right now, the transcripts are being emailed to us. So I'm going to put in the chat our email address for emailed transcripts. And it's basically just grad admissions, sauder.ubc.ca. So, oops, sorry, put a spelling mistake there, grad admissions. Okay. So that is the email address where your institutions can email your transcripts. And then, you know, like what the different deadlines are for those. And then they even have like a further link for you to discover like more about like official transcripts if you need to like look into more detail or you have a really specific case. Now, always, if you encounter troubles with like transcripts, or you have questions, you can always email our main administrative line. Our great hardworking folks in admissions who are looking at your applications and all your documents. They can be reached at pmba@sauder.ubc.ca, and of course you can always reach me directly as well. My address is in the chat box there. So always, like, if there's something going on with the transcripts, now we made it easier with the email, but still I know that there's institutions that will email even in this situation. So I know it's complicated. So if nothing's answered in this like really detailed website that we have, just feel free to get in contact with us. Now, I also get a lot of questions about GMAT GRE waiver. Now I'm going to mention something really important for those of you that are eligible for GMAT GRE waiver. Now you can see that there's waiver eligibility requirements that are listed here on our website, right? If you come from a BCom background, you come from a STEM field, you know, there's these kind of like guidelines that we put out here, or you're a medical doctor, or you have CFA level 3, or you have a PhD, you may qualify for a GMAT waiver. So read these instructions carefully because there's a certain way to apply for it. You know, you have to put a date of December 31st, 2021, and that will trigger our system to evaluate your application for a GMAT waiver. Now, very importantly, note this date, August 31st. You need to submit your application. You need to like submit, pay your fee, like submit the full application by August 31st, 2021, in order to be eligible for consideration for a GMAT waiver. So those of you that are listening, that are thinking of applying for January 2022, keep that date in mind because that is the cutoff for when we would consider applications for GMAT GRE waivers. Okay, so those are kind of some of the requirements I wanted to show you. This web page, I'm also going to just like put this onto the chat box so that you guys have the page and then you guys are able to like read all the instructions. And just quite a lot of detail in there. So it should be a nice checkbox for this, for any kind of admissions question that you have. And of course, if anything that's not answered in this kind of checkbox or in this URL that I just posted, of course, reach out to us and we'd be more than happy to assist you. So a few questions have popped up from that. Vivian from Frank, they're asking, if you qualify for a language requirement waiver, do you have to notify the program or the program will grant the waiver automatically? I would just, we have familiarity with a lot of institutions, so chances are we've dealt with your institution, but just in case, you can always just email us at pmba@sauder.ubc.ca and just note to us that your institution was, the medium of instruction was English, and that you would like to request a waiver of the English language testing, and then we would take things from there. Let me check if there's further questions that came out in the Q&A. Okay, so there's a question from Larissa about like, what is, what if you submit a GMAT waiver and you don't qualify? Will you be able to reapply with a GMAT score before the October deadline? Absolutely. So if you submit a request for a GMAT waiver and then we notify you that you do need to write the test, the request for waiver was declined, absolutely you can still write the test and apply by the October deadline. So great question. Thank you, Larissa, for asking that. Econ majors with a B+ average in the bachelor's degree. Yes, I would say if you're from an econ background, we will look at the background because sometimes econ degrees, like maybe if it doesn't have enough quantitative subject matter, it might not be. So we haven't listed it only because we want to be careful about like, because some may have more or less quants. We want to just be careful and responsible. Like the GMAT is not something that we want to make people write just for the fun of it. It's really to ensure that you can survive this program. So we would be looking at the quant. So absolutely, if you are econ background with a B+ major, feel free to submit the request for waiver. And then of course, if it doesn't work out, then we will inform you of it. Kevin's answering Sean's question. For completed application, references should be submitted, or can I share the emails? Okay, so in terms of completing your application, I know sometimes your references can take some time to submit their actual reference, which is basically an email form that we email them. All right, so when you provide their email address, and like all the relevant contact information, we basically email them a form that they take about 30 to 40 minutes to fill out. So it's a fairly easy process because they don't have to format an entire letter. Now, your application will be considered submitted with just their contact information, but it won't be considered complete until the reference comes in. Now, for the purposes of something like the GMAT waiver by the August 31st deadline, even if we just have the contact information of your references, that will be enough to qualify your application to be considered for the waiver. Okay, I think that was all the open questions that we have there. I think that is it. So thank you so much for joining us for this additional session. Okay, like just as they're trying to close, we have a few questions coming in. Okay. Do we contact PMB at sauder.ubc.ca for a language and GMAT waiver before we submit, or okay. So language requests, you can just email PMB at sauder.ubc.ca. For the GMAT waiver, please refer to that website I sent you. There's specific instructions on how to apply for it, and it's within the application itself. Karen's question, if total GMAT score is meeting the requirement for verbal is less than 50. So, okay, that's a good question. Now, ideally, your GMAT score has 50th percentile for both the verbal and the quantitative section. By the way, we just look at the verbal and quantitative, not the integrated reasoning or the analytical writing. But if one of the sections, either verbal or quant, are less than 50%, it's not ideal, but it's not a deal breaker. So, you can always email your specific case to me and we can do an assessment. Sometimes if your transcripts are strong enough in a quantitative subject area, like if it all balances out academically, it could be fine. Obviously, you want to be on this, if you want to be on the super safe side, you want to write the test again and try to get in the 50th percentile for both verbal and quantitative section, but it's not a deal breaker if it's not quite at the 50th percentile. It's a case-by-case basis then. Okay, just seeing here. Okay, I think we are at the end of the questions. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much, Maria, for joining us from the beautiful location where you are right now. It looks like the main library, but I appreciate you guys sticking around and learning more about the application process. And then of course, like you have all our contact information. If there's anything else that we can help you with, just feel free to reach out to us. Thank you again, and everybody have a wonderful day.